Hello, business innovators and educators. You're listening to The Enterprise Learning Architect. I'm your host, Chris Knotts, here to guide you through practices and ideas you can use to help build a culture of learning in your organization. Stay tuned to power up your professional playbook as we have conversations with exceptional people who share their experience in achieving successful learning outcomes. Ready to innovate, educate, and iterate? Let's do it. Coming up on the ELA podcast, we're thrilled today to welcome Michael Schank, a transformation champion and author of the groundbreaking new book, Digital Transformation Success. With 25 years of experience under his belt, built on his achievements as a consultant with both Accenture and EY, as well as executive leadership roles at two major American banks, Michael has not only mastered, but also molded the landscape of digital transformation and operational excellence. He's here to unpack his innovative process inventory framework. Get ready to discover how to harness practical, immediately accessible tools for strategic alignment and operational efficiency from one of the most accomplished and innovative transformation consultants I know. Mike, welcome to the ELA podcast. Glad to have you.
It's my pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Appreciate the time. So, I have a few things I want to pick your brain about today, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. So, Mike, you've got a Let's just start with the title of your book, which I think is actually a great starting point. You've got a book recently released called Digital Transformation Success. And that's a term maybe some of us have a love hate relationship with, but I think more importantly, what the heck are people talking about? Let's define some terms here. So
Yep.
let's talk about digital transformation first of all, and then let's talk about success, right? So this is something that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So if somebody off the street is asking you for your definition of digital transformation, what the heck are you talking about?
For sure. So I would break that term up. So first, I would define transformation. So transformation is a profound change in how an organization operates and delivers value to their customer. It spans everything from people, process, technology, third parties, vendor support, everything that goes into how an organization operates. The digital part is leveraging new technologies to change business models, to advance ways of working, customer experiences, et cetera. And that could be automation, AI. It could mean a whole bunch of things. The bag of technologies that drives digital transformation is fairly large. And then success. Oh, and then let me say, my book is Digital Transformation Success. But I would say there's many different types of transformations. You could do a mergers and acquisitions. You could do a cultural transformation. You could do any kind of transformation. My book, I think, leads to success. So, what does success mean? So, there's an industry accepted stat that 70% of transformations fail, and I found the stat too that the global spend for transformation programs is expected to exceed $3.4 trillion. It's a massive number. So, what that means is there's a lot of organizations drive these, but because of the complexity of their environment, they face a number of challenges of people not being aligned, technology becoming too complex to manage, just managing this whole process and this whole journey just becomes so overwhelming. And it's usually a multi-year journey that there's usually failures, and that could be lost investment, missed timelines, missed expectations for what they were trying to shoot for in the transformation. And that's what I write about in my book, is I think I have a solution to help organizations transform successfully.
Cool. Yeah, man. And I mean, in some cases, I start wondering, is this even possible, or are we talking about the same thing? As you mentioned,
Yeah.
digital transformation, there's a number of different angles of attack, right? It could
Yep.
just be referring to some kind of a new tool or new platform implementation. And you hear the phrase associated with that. You know, in our space over here, we deal with a lot of agile transformations and
Yep.
DevOps transformations. These are very particular zones of the org, usually. But
Yep.
you're trying to take quite a holistic view of the org, right?
For sure. Yeah. Everything's in scope for what I'm trying to tackle, because whether it's core processes, if you have a definition for that, or if it's even the back end, every part of the organization has a role to play, especially if you're going through a comprehensive organization. So you need to start with that holistic.
Right on. And so, what's your success criteria then? What if business leaders sees? What are they talking about if they're getting asked for funding for a transformation initiative? What are they expecting to get out of that?
So to succeed, in my mind, you need to get the organization into alignment, and that means two things. That's vertical alignment. So from your CEO or your C-suite down to individual contributors, everyone knows their role and knows how they the things that the actions they need to take to determine success or to lead to success for the transformations. And then horizontal alignment, so that's your different teams of your business, technology, risk, your data teams, etc., all working together in a cohesive fashion. Everyone knows how to collaborate, how to communicate across. To so to get to that full alignment, I think an organization needs a common language. That common language has to satisfy four criteria. One, it's got to help you drive your transformation through the lens of the business, because you have to remain focused on what are you changing in terms of the value you create for your customers, or how you grow, or something that's value led. Two, it's got to uh, join all of these different perspectives together in these teams, so leading to the the alignment across. Third, it's got to capture the nuances and idiosyncrasies of each of your businesses. So there's a lot of generic frameworks out there, like capability models or APQC, et cetera, but those don't capture all the specifics of your organization. You've got to detail out all the inefficiencies, all the ugliness, where the dead bodies are, et cetera. So the solution to that, to me, the only common language that satisfies all that criteria is process. But how do you create process as a common language? Because we all talk about process, and process is everywhere. But you've got to start with the holistic. And of as we talked about, is what is you've got to inventory every single process that happens in your environment. So how do you inventory every process? You have to anchor to something that's holistic, which is your organizational hierarchy. So start at the top of the hierarchy and just ask a simple question. What is it that you do? And then you take what they describe that they do, and you put it in the verb noun process names. And then you ask their teams what they do, and you ask their teams what they do, until you get to a level where you've got all the process information that happens in the environment. And then you walk the chain back up and you ask people to validate that I've captured everything accurately and comprehensively. And I ask for formal attestations. But when I get that, now I have everyone saying, this is my process environment. Now, this becomes now a common language to join different perspectives and languages across all these, business, technology, et cetera. It is a point for organizational knowledge. So now I could join other metadata in the environment. So what is my application data, my risk data, my vendor data? I could bring all those from my disparate operational sources of information. I could co-locate it with this process taxonomy. Now I could start doing the associations, so that I create this one single operational intelligence repository that describes everything my organization does, from a high level view to a low level view. And that becomes super powerful when you're driving change, because now I can be very specific on what processes are impacted, what people need to are associated with those, because it's built on an ownership model, and what are all the resources that have to change across. And that's what helps you drive this transformation in a business oriented and consistent manner.
So you're creating a large repository, both of a taxonomy, an
Yep.
organization, but also like a large library of processes that it sounds like then serves as a sort of a Rosetta Stone for all the other different flavors of transformation that might happen. Am I catching that
Yep.
correctly?
That's it's exactly right. So one process taxonomy that helps you do everything you need to do from a transformation. So from defining what your strategy is, to getting very precise in the impacts of what processes need to change for that strategy, to the entire change process. So going from defining projects, so project charters your scope, but what processes are in scope from this, to what's my new target operating model. So leveraging that process taxonomy to say, okay, here's my current state. What does my future state of my people, process, technology environment look like? To better requirements and testing, et cetera. Operational excellence. So a lot of operational excellence is focused on Lean Six Sigma, which is one or two processes, and how do I do the through the DMAIC methodology. How do I inspect what my problems are and then find solutions? To now, I'm looking at a 30,000 foot level and saying, where am I inefficient in resource usage, and where do I have waste, so I can eliminate that at that level. To risk management, I think, is a big one. So for organizations, and specifically ones in industries that are highly regulated, you need to understand what is my business context so that you could attach, and that's process. So what is my process? What are the risks on those processes? What are the controls on those risks? And you can't have a high quality risk management program without having a good understanding of what your processes are. So it really does everything from a transformation perspective. So one language, one set of information that all resources could use to get on the same page.
Right on. So a couple other things that I want to pick your brain about a little bit. So obviously,
Please.
your consulting practice is process inventory advisors. So go ahead and throw out that quick plug.
Love
It's
it.
all right there in the name. Process inventory is the Rosetta Stone, the repo that we're talking about. So
Yeah.
I notice on LinkedIn and in other places sometimes you stir the pot a little bit here, whether intentionally or not. But the transformation template, if you will, is oriented around business process. Now, I think that
Yes.
makes sense. You've got a great narrative there, but sometimes people get grouchy about this focus on process only, right? And so
Yep.
I'm thinking specifically about some of the people out there in my network and in our audience, and I'm thinking specifically of the sector around kind of like this idea of organizational agility. So that's
Yep.
something where I'm coming at things a lot from sort of an agile perspective, from teams all the way up to the overall org or the overall portfolio. And so there's people out there that I respect a lot, and I think they have a real point, which is that if you think about it from a learning perspective, so
Yep.
we're in the learning business, and you've got a training catalog full of agility classes, and there's a whole industry out there around this stuff, certifications and 2-day boot camps and things like that that are going to supposedly drive more agile practices.
Yep.
And there's a bit of pushback against that, and I think rightly so, in that some of those classes turn the idea of agility into a process template. Now, that's not,
Yep.
to be clear, exactly the same type of that's not necessarily the same process definition that you're talking about, but we'll
Yep.
get to that in a minute, right? But the reality is there. You're giving people kind of a bit of a lightweight 2-week or 4-week cadence, a time blocked work process there, right? So
Yep.
that has stirred pushback. That has stirred pushback around the idea that really to be successful with agility, you're not trying to bake in some kind of process. You don't want to fixate on that. It's
Yep.
it's a cultural thing, right? It's the
For sure.
idea of building learning cycles from the personal to the portfolio level, getting that learning baked in, changing mindsets. You hear a lot about this. And so I just want to think about that, because if you're coming at something from a process centric point of view and you run into objections or even just questions around the idea that no, 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 if you're really going to get more agility baked into your culture, you've got to focus more on kind of the individual attitudes, the safety culture. You get where I'm going with this, right?
Totally.
So speak to that for a moment for me, because I can see both sides.
Yeah.
And I guess one thing I would say too is that if you don't have some focus on process, then the organizations are just too big, right? They're just too
Yeah.
complicated. The whole thing turns into a big pile of cottage cheese, and nothing is working together. But
Yep.
I do think there's a point as well that there's a big cultural component here. There's a big focus on, or there's a need for abstract improvement as well. And just because you've got all your processes defined and you've got sort of a central repository of that, maybe that's not the whole story. I'm not
Yeah.
advocating for either. I just want to get your perspective on that.
Yeah. No. Great question, Chris. So in some ways, it's not in conflict, because I think what you're talking about with process and agile is, with a true agile team, you don't want to overbake the process, because it's all about a small group of team, a cross-functional team getting together and learning on their own and figuring out, maybe we don't know what the requirements are, and we're kind of just doing until we find what the right answer is. And I think that's absolutely great, and I think that practice should continue forever. But what I'm talking about is, what if we could arm that team with a couple things, with more information about how the environment works, so they can understand what processes exist, what resources are behind it, who's the accountability, etc. And then two, give them a way to describe what they're doing so that they could align with other teams that are doing, maybe other Scrum teams or other Agile teams in the environment. So, I've seen a lot of transformations. I've been in a lot of companies where they run large transformations with a lot of little Scrum teams. Well, how do you define the boundaries between what those teams are doing so that they're completely aligned? Because there could be overlap, right? And that's where the process inventory becomes a language where they could specifically describe what they're doing, and then it could join into a larger program so that the program managers can identify what the overarching transformation is doing from this business lens. I think there's another aspect of this as well that I think really leads into agility. So there's agile in the methodology sense, but then there's the more generic agility, which is, how do organizations, we're in an environment where the external world is changing rapidly. Technology is, I mean, ChatGPT just came out in November of 2022, and like, it's changed the world already. There's and nobody can predict what that means, what automation and AI is going to mean in 5 years. There's obviously geopolitical risk. There's a whole bunch of risks out there. So how do organizations adapt? Because uh, the business models and how they operate today could become uh, um, obsolete in the next few years. So you need to get to agility, which is, you need to be able to respond to change in a very rapid manner to protect your market share, or even gain market share, or just prevent yourself from becoming in a competitive disadvantage. The way you do that, in my mind, is you need to make your environment extremely transparent, and that you so that you when those changes occur, you could respond in a moment's notice. So you understand very clearly what has to change, who's accountable for that change, and you could do it in a quick timeline. The only way to do that is to make your environment completely transparent through a process inventory type framework and through the operational intelligence that I'm talking about. Otherwise, any large effort is going to start with you know, for 4 or 6 months or whatever extensive current state discovery process. And who needs that? Let's just get quickly to value. And the way you get to quickly to value is you make everything transparent.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, that 6-month life cycle is going to be too long anyway, right? Like, that's going to be
Exactly.
out of date by the time you finish. So
Yeah.
that's a great answer. I love that. So, just to unpack a couple of your points that I think are key there. So you are using the process inventory repo. You're not putting that in the driver's seat necessarily, but it's a tool, it's a platform there to put a floor under people, and you're actually supporting this ability to build
For
in
sure.
learning cycles, which obviously can be much faster if everybody's speaking the same language and they have clear expectations. So it's really about alignment, right? So
For sure.
if you're using process inventory as a tool to drive more alignment, more transparency, now you're at kind of a both end situation. It's not an either or, right?
For sure, for sure. I think there's another angle to this. And I don't know if you had another question, but I think there's another angle in that, the in the age of AI, it's going to replace the repetitive and mundane tasks that our people do, and it's gonna force our workforce into more higher level cognitive and critical thinking type skills. And I think that's scary for a lot of people. But I think organizations, and especially leaders, should look at it as an opportunity to transform the workforce into more of a high performing workforce. And how do they do that? Um, there's different innovation models that are coming on the scene with this whole digital kind of transformation revolution. One is democratic innovation, and really democratized innovation. It states that every single person in an organization has some level of expertise about what they do. So why not tap into that knowledge and get them to drive innovation in whatever they do, better processes, better products, better ways of doing whatever they're doing. So to and traditional innovation models have been all top down or a centralized maybe R&D team that said here's what our innovation is. But in democratized innovation everyone has a role. But how do you get there? It's a combination of strong accountability and strong autonomy. So accountability is everyone's got to be very clear of what they're responsible for. And what process inventory does is it identifies accountability for every process that's identified has an owner. And it's not just an owner for fixing processes or optimizing processes, but it's the day-to-day execution, which I think is missing in a lot of process owner conversations. And then the second is autonomy. So now I know what you own, and now you know what you own. But now I've got to give you the leeway. And as a leader, I need to build a culture of experimentation and trying new things, and understanding that a lot of innovations will fail, but there's a lot of learning to be gained in failures, and some of those breakthroughs will be fantastical innovations. And not only will that l- power the performance of your organization, but that's going to have a high impact on the engagement of your employees because they know that they are coming to work not only just to do their job, but to contribute to something bigger and better. And that's ultimately, I believe, at the end of the day, that's what people are looking for.
I agree completely. And so I love some of the priorities that may not be immediately obvious when you first
Yeah,
are looking at process inventory, but those are the values we're really trying to unlock. And they can be hard to unlock. They can be hard
yeah,
to break down into terms that get beyond just soft skills or sort of these abstract ideas. All right, you want to provide psychological safety, fulfillment in people's work. I mean, you do get into some practical aspects
yeah,
pretty quickly, right? Whereas like everybody's got a little bit of expertise. You want to sort of roll this up, figure out how to organize it. How do you get these thousands of little micro pieces of expertise aligned? And of course, if you don't have a good situation for the people who are working in the environment, then there's
yep,
just going to be churn and it's going to be a revolving door. And we've all seen this, right? Like, so you people, about the time they really have some idea of what's going on and what the
yep,
mission is, then life sucks there, and so they leave and rinse and
yeah,
repeat, and it's not good. So again, creating a platform so that people feel like there's a place for this, and but at the same time, everybody's not just innovation central and they're trying all kinds of different things, and there's no alignment there, right? Which is
yep,
something you also see, right? I mean, and primarily I think when it's sort of a message that comes from leadership that we really want to embrace innovation culture, but there's not really a lot of definition around that is what that
yeah,
is, right? Like you're not really saying um, innovation culture is a fast ability to adapt. It's really fundamentally how can you respond as fast as possible to the inevitable change, and in a way that's aligned with business needs. It's not just
yeah,
kind of trying this or trying that, putting your finger in the wind and trying to take a guess. So
yeah,
um, yeah, you get what I'm saying, but
totally.
that's I think the thing that I like a lot is that you're able to start actually mapping some of these human factors that we know are really important, but into some things that can actually be quantified a little better.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's a transformation. At the end of the day, it's still a people problem, or people are part of the solution. Is you've got to frame it in such a way your people understand exactly what they need to do, what their role is, and I think the only way to do that in a consistent way, and that's why 70% fail, is because they're not clear on expectations, and that's what I think process inventory brings.
Yeah, and it gives you a tool for it because saying
Yeah,
you need to clarify expectations is one thing, but a lot of times those expectations are just not. I think they're not decomposed enough, right? Like
exactly.
the spirit of the expectation can be communicated, but people don't understand how. They need
Yeah,
to understand how to do their job. How can they align? They want to, but
yeah,
uh, but without a framework there,
for
that's
sure.
maybe not quite as prescriptive. It's a true framework, right? Because instead of just turning into another another top-down implementation or something that's plan driven or something where there's steps that people follow. It's a true framework in terms of being a floor there that people can use.
For sure. And there's a hierarchy. I think one thing, and process owner is a hot topic in many areas, but I think one thing people miss is if I own something, my boss also has some level of ownership, and his boss also has some level of ownership. So it's hierarchical. So we've got to have this whole structure kind of aligned to what happens in the environment and who has ownership, so we could clarify those expectations, so that we could drive from a culture of accountability, and that's what I think process inventory brings.
Cool. So I want to pick your brain about a little something else here. Let's pivot
Yep.
a little bit to some kind of some real world experience and what your report from the ground is here. So if you're like me, you probably run into situations often where the name of the game, all right, is you're defining and kind of articulating a cohesive inventory of something. But you may, if and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you may run into a situation where these processes really aren't well defined, right? Like people
Yep.
don't even know. The organization itself doesn't even know. So if your mission is to define and inventory the processes in an ordered way, and you're doing this obviously with a lot of discovery, you're
Yep.
bringing some formality there around the attestation, and you're actually getting a formal library set up. But
Yep.
what do you encounter situations where it's like, gosh, they just don't know, there's not good definition there, and then how do you navigate that, right? If there's nothing to inventory, do you have to help them define it, or does it turn into an exercise of actually figuring out what the processes should look like? Tell us about that.
Actually, it's a lot more straightforward than you think. Um, so when I was at Citibank, I was head of process excellence for the U.S. retail bank, and when I joined there in about 21, I set out on this mission to inventory every process within the U.S. retail bank, which is a massive undertaking because they have a retail bank, a mortgage bank, two credit card divisions, and a bunch of other internal stuff. I actually took a team of four people, and we've within a year kind of did about 75% of it. And to me, that's a uh, just shows with four people, just shows how efficient this is, because my 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 proposition is to you is if I go to you and I just ask the question, what do you do in the current state? I'm not asking future state. I'm not asking anything. I just ask what you do. You should know what you do. Like, and there's no debate, and there's nobody else coming into the conversation saying, other than your boss, maybe that's, oh, Chris doesn't do that, right? So I just ask you what you do, and you explain it, and I just write it down verb noun, and then I take it back to you, and I say, is this right? And I capture all the definitions, etc. And that's usually a quick conversation. So within, say, 2 1-hour sessions, I could complete your area. So now I take that structured approach, and I do this top down, walk the tree down that I mentioned, and I can actually do an area fairly quick with a low number of people. Now, where I think a lot of kind of some of this, where I think some of the challenges come in, and I've been in a lot of areas where an organization is trying to create a enterprise capability model. Well, that's one capability model that covers many different diverse businesses that do a lot of different things. That's when you get into almost religious wars of, no, don't call it
Yeah.
this, call it that, and don't structure it this way, structure it that way. And I avoid all that. And one thing that I do is I think there's two things. There's a need for a process inventory, which is inventory what every organization does in their own language, but then also have a capability model, which is a abstract concept of all the things the organization has the ability to do. Those are important because and I've used a lot of this analogy of the dictionary versus the thesaurus. So my dictionaries, I want a definition of every single process that happens in the environment, but then the thesaurus is, tell me all the like processes. So when I was at Citi, you could open an account in the credit card, mortgage, retail bank, wealth management, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to be able to map my process inventory processes to my capability model, and if I have that, now I can say, here's all the account opening processes. Now, if I want to drive standardization, if I want to do some maybe shared service stuff, I want to make sure that they all treat controls the same way. Now I have that understanding of the current world, and I have the owners. So now I could drive whatever I'm looking for from an optimization and rationalization perspective.
Cool. So you're getting to a situation here where you're kind of getting the best of both worlds a little bit.
Yeah,
You're getting a quantifiable, standardized language that allows people to talk across departments, across roles with each other,
yep,
speak the same language. But there's also an inherent sort of flexibility and empowerment there because it's almost like now we all have we're reading from the same rule book here, and
yeah,
that allows us to do things in a way that it pretty much creates efficiencies, right? Like
yeah,
it creates a model for communication channels and maybe
yeah,
avoids some of the gnarlier aspects of Conway's law.
yeah,
So
yeah.
let's
Oh,
I'm
good.
sorry, no, you go ahead.
No, I was just saying. Did you ever see the tree swing diagram? It's a very famous diagram
Oh yeah,
that
I think
shows.
most of our audience has probably seen that diagram.
Yeah, so here's what the business described. Here's what product management created. Here's what the developer developed. Like, and it's just, I think that I love using that in discussions because I think it perfectly captures how the lack of being on the same page and communication gaps could cost organizations uh, dearly.
Yeah, you've never seen anybody argue with that cartoon.
Exactly, exactly.
Uh, so let me circle back around to the ROI here. So there's
Yeah,
obviously some level of commitment needed here, and as you've described, it may even be a little bit lightweight. It might be a little bit less of a charge than
yeah,
people may start out thinking. But it's maybe not even the funding of doing this might not be the primary concern, but there's got to be, I think, some commitment around the
yep,
priorities. And so at some level, you are going to encounter decision makers who want to understand the business case. And so we
yep,
always usually ask about business case here for for what the guests are
yeah,
doing. And I know that you've probably got a very well articulated way to describe that. So I'll ask you to
sure.
talk about the business case.
So it all starts. So first off, I agree with you. To do something like this, I think starts with top down leadership commitment. It is not heavy as you mentioned, but you've got to have leaders that understand that to do transformation successfully, you have to have a process lens. And to have a process lens, you do need a process center of excellence or whatever you call a process capability that creates and maintains this information for not only today's usage but for sustained usage in the future. The I always start with, and it's one of my core services that I do as a consulting company is help organizations stand up their process center of excellence. And it always has to start with why. So, why are you doing it? What is the context for your transformation? Is it to adopt digital technologies? Is it to enhance your customer experience? Is it to get your regulators off your back and make sure that you're doing better job of complying with regulations, et cetera? So I think it all starts with that, and then the ROI is going to flow from that. The I think there's a couple different ways to measure ROI. One is in the transformation itself, which is the application of my budget and my time, and am I meeting my commitments? So there's a whole bunch of project management stats and program management stats around that, and I think that's one very clear measurement. And then I think the others really depend on what your why is, but following that thread. If it's risk management, then it should be I have better risk reports, I have a better control environment, I have less consent orders or management matters requiring attention from the regulators. If it's customer experience, then it's my I have better customer experience surveys, better I'm sure the blanket on the metric, but your all your customer stats. If it's your technology environment, then it's whatever you're measuring. So it can be vast, but I think there's a lot of measures and metrics that I've identified in my book that you could start to capture and measure ROI.
Excellent. Yeah, some good concrete examples there. And so, to be clear, too, you're talking about outcomes, not
Yeah,
outputs, right? So, the process
exactly.
inventory is not some sort of end product here, it's a
No.
vehicle. And then you can target probably what are the greatest pain points, what are the greatest
Yes.
risks, things like that. Yeah.
That actually brings up a good point too. Is it's not just about creating process models for process modeling's sake. You've got to change the way the organization works. And what I mean that is like, you know, organizations have methodologies for how they define strategy and how they do projects and how they do efficiencies and all that stuff. Now you've got to go into those areas and change the methodology so that you're using this process inventory, and this information of your process environment and operational environment to now do those differently. So now I'm maybe doing risk assessments using my process inventory as my anchor point for identifying what are my processes and what are risks are on those processes. So you've really got to change behavior of the whole organization of how they leverage this information to drive to your goals more effectively.
Yeah, and you're sort of doing this by cultivating a better, um, I guess you might call it like better neurons
For
for
sure.
information to travel here. Yeah, yeah.
For
Um,
sure.
well, I love the clarity here. You've obviously spent a lot of time thinking and practicing this
Yeah.
approach. So maybe just one more question before we wrap up here, but um, the learning angle here, right? So
Yeah.
bringing kind of back to our side a little bit, any kind of transformation initiative, any kind of change, or really like any type of consulting toolkit is probably going to involve some sort of learning component. There's a few different
Yep.
ways to define that. I mean, you could be talking about training on a new tool, or you could just be talking about awareness, or getting everybody speaking the same vocabulary or whatever.
Yep.
But from the process inventory side, if you are involved in this and you're driving the transformation using your approach, how do you leverage learning, and what does that look like? Either just from a modality standpoint, or just from a kind of what do we need people to to achieve
Yeah.
standpoint. Yeah, you talk about the learning component.
So I think I've identified, sorry, about 7 or 8 personas that, and it's one thing I want to do is create a lot of learning, both in person and online. But I've identified about 7 or 8 personas that I think are key. And I think the learning is a little bit different based on each of them. And it starts with who your transformation leader is. So educating those senior leaders, not on how to do this, but more of the value that it brings and what they need to do and how they need to leverage this tool to shape their programs to get them to be successful. Another one is process modelers. So understanding all the models that come into this, how you construct them, what's the stakeholders in the environment, how do you like what are the standards and how do you validate quality, because quality is super important in this, because everything has to accurately reflect what the business does, to standing up a process center of excellence to business analysts. So how do you do all your analysis stuff to write better requirements and define better solutions. And then there's all the ones around the use cases that I mentioned. So risk management. So how do you use this platform to create better risk assessments and define better controls and make sure that your organization is safeguarding itself, their customers, the markets they serve. Change management. So how do you bake this into your SDLC methodology so that you're leveraging this business context to create better solutions on time, on budget, with all the accountability that I mentioned. And it goes on and on. But I think there's a lot of, back to the question is, there's a lot of different areas that this could be, that a lot of different personas that need to be trained on this. And that's something that I'm focused on developing.
Yeah, so you're meeting different people where they are, which I think is
Yep.
really important. And then I'll just sort of make the call out, 'cause it's something you refer to there. I think the business analyst
Yep.
community in an organization is probably potentially a great ally here, right? Because for one thing, I think they're sidelined sometimes.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I think that's a struggle for them. They sit in a unique role of translating, often using process definition anyway,
Yep.
for certain outcomes, translating between technical teams and engineering teams and things like that. But I think sometimes they're just not empowered. So
For
just
sure.
just calling that out, a nod to the BAs out there. They're doing a really important job, and there's probably ways to leverage their capabilities even more
Oh,
in the
for
context
sure.
of framework like this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how much more effective could they be if they were armed with everything that the business does from high level to low level? It just seems like they would. super energize what they do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, this has been a great conversation, as I knew it would be. I love the clarity here, and I love the approach, and I just love how thorough you've been about breaking it down. And in particular, I love the idea that you've got a consulting solution in which you can come in and you do obviously some of the things that typical consultants might do in terms of discovery and things like
Yeah.
that, breaking things down. But you're not ending with just like a stack of recommendations with no empowerment behind it. You're actually going to have a you're going to have an artifact there,
Yep.
just even if they don't proceed, right? Like there's going to be
Yes.
something extremely useful there that has a lot of value potential for all kinds of different stakeholders.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I really believe, and as I started with, 70% of transformations fail. There is no other solution in the market trying to solve that problem, and I really believe process inventory is that solution.
Cool. Well, Mike's new book is Digital Transformation Success, and check it out. Mike's local to me, so we've had lunch a few times. It's nice to see you in person, but it's also been nice to have that chat. If people are interested in PIA or your book or your stuff, where can they find you?
So the book's on Amazon. So digital transformation success, as you mentioned, very active on LinkedIn. So I post a lot on content, as you mentioned, it somewhat stirring the pot. So if you want to see that. And then lastly, find me on processinventory.com. That's my company website, and I detail my services, some of the training, have a lot of my thought leadership material up there. So check me out there.
All right, good deal. Well, Mike, thanks for joining. We really appreciate the time. Know you're busy, but we look forward to the next time we connect, and people know where to find you. So thanks for joining us on the ELA podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Chris. It's been my pleasure.
Good deal.